Imagine being a princess, but no one sees you. They only see your bones, your skeletal frame so thin that your bones seem to have a life of their own. It's not just the looks that make you invisible, though, it's the way people talk about you when they think you can't hear. I know this all too well. In my village, I was the girl everyone whispered about. They said I looked like a walking skeleton. Growing up with skeletal dysplasias, a condition that made my bones fragile and my body too thin, wasn't easy. I wasn't like the other girls in the village. They had curves, they had strength, but I only had my bones. No matter how much I tried to hide, I couldn't escape the stares, the pitying glances, the whispers that followed me everywhere. Imagine finally finding someone who sees past your biggest struggle, who loves you completely, only to throw it all away when things get better. That's my story, and it's a tough one to tell. It's about learning the hard way that sometimes, the love you crave was right there all along, wrapped in a package you almost missed. Growing up, my body was different. Not in a cool, unique way, but in a way that made people stare and whisper. I have skeletal dysplasia, a genetic condition that messes with how my bones and cartilage grew. It made me incredibly thin, my bones sticking out in ways that just weren't normal. Kids would point, call me names, and sometimes, they'd even make up cruel little songs about how I looked like a fragile doll that could break. It hurt. A lot. My parents tried everything they could do. Taking me to various specialist hospitals, doctors, and placing me in special diets, you name it. But nothing changed how my body was built. I felt like a mistake, like I was broken. And after a while, I just gave up on the idea of ever being truly happy, especially when it came to finding someone who could love me with all this going on. My parents, King Adibeo and Queen Omotela, loved me deeply. But I could see the worry in their eyes every time they looked at me. They had 3 beautiful daughters, and I was their eldest. Yet, no suitor came forward for me. My sisters were loved, admired, and adored by everyone. But I was the skeleton. Finding love felt impossible. Who would want someone who looked like me, someone with so many physical challenges? I just couldn't picture it. I believed any guy who even showed interest would only be doing it out of pity, or maybe because my family had a little bit of status in our small community. But pity wasn't love. And I desperately, deeply wanted to be loved for me, not for what I had or what I lacked. My condition wasn't just about how I looked, it affected how I moved, how I felt. It was a constant reminder that I was different, that I was limited. This feeling of being inadequate, of not being enough, became a heavy weight on my heart, heavier than my actual body ever was. It colored everything I did, everything I thought about myself. The only time I felt truly free, truly alive, was when I danced. It sounds weird, right? With my body the way it was. But when the music played, something shifted inside me. I'd find a quiet corner, away from everyone, and just move. It wasn't graceful or perfect, but it was mine. I'd make up my own rhythms, hum tunes under my breath, and just let the music guide me. During our town's yearly festival, I'd always find a hidden spot near the edge of the crowds, close enough to hear the drums and flutes, and I'd dance until I was breathless. I always hid, though. I couldn't stand the thought of someone seeing my skeletal frame moving, and mocking me. The fear of that judgment kept me in the shadows, even when my heart was soaring with the music. This year's festival was buzzing with excitement. Everyone was showing off their best clothes, practicing their dance moves, getting ready for the big day. Me? I was just focused on finding my usual hiding spot, the place where I could hear the music and dance without being seen. I finally found the perfect spot, tucked away behind some old oak trees, where the sounds of the drums and flutes came through crystal clear. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and let the music wash over me. I started to move, tentatively at first, then with more freedom as I got lost in the rhythm. It was just me and the music, a little bubble of happiness in my world. I forgot about everything else, the stares, the whispers, the ache in my bones. As I was dancing, completely lost in my own world, I noticed a drumbeat getting louder, closer. It was different from the festival music, a more personal, resonant sound. I didn't really pay attention at first, just kept moving. But then, the main festival music suddenly stopped. Silence fell over the square, but the solo drumbeat continued, strong and steady. I stopped dancing, my heart pounding. I turned around, and there he was. A guy, standing a little way off, playing a drum with a huge, genuine smile on his face. When he saw me turn, he stopped playing. My first instinct was to run, to hide. He must be here to make fun of me. I started to run, but my body, with a skeletal dysplasia, wasn't built for speed. He caught up to me easily. I stood there, panting, my chest hurting. "Leave me alone," I gasped out. "Go find your comedy show somewhere else." I was so used to being the punchline. He looked at me with such kindness in his eyes, and for a second, I was confused. Why wasn't he laughing? "I got lost trying to get to the market square," he said, his voice calm and gentle. "I was trying to find my way when I saw you dancing. You looked so happy, I just wanted to add to it with my drums." I looked at his clothes, he wasn't from my village. He was a stranger. I felt a blush creep up my neck. I had completely misjudged him. I thanked him, feeling a little foolish, then pointed him towards the market square. But he just smiled and shook his head. "I'd rather stay here and play for you, if you don't mind," he said. Before I could even protest, he started drumming again, a light, inviting rhythm. He looked at me, his eyes sparkling, urging me to dance. I hesitated for a moment. What was the harm? He was a stranger, I'd probably never see him again. And I really wanted to dance. So, slowly, tentatively, I started to move. Small steps, little hip movements, letting the music guide me. It felt surprisingly easy, dancing to his beat. We danced like that for a long time, me moving to his drumming. It was different from dancing alone. There was a connection, the shared joy in the music. When I finally stopped, I was smiling. A real smile. "Thank you, Mr. Drummer," I said, still a little out of breath. "I really enjoyed that." He chuckled, a warm, pleasant sound. "My name's not Mr. Drummer," he said. "It's Mustafa." I told him my name, Damilola. The conversation flowed easily after that. We talked about the festival, about music, about our villages. It felt easy, comfortable, like we'd known each other for a long time. It was a feeling I wasn't used to, this genuine connection with someone who didn't seem to notice or care about my skeletal dysplasia. As the sun started to set, I knew I had to go home. I told Mustafa, and he looked a little disappointed. "Will you come back tomorrow?" he asked, his eyes hopeful. I hesitated for a moment, the old fears creeping in. But the memory of dancing with him, of feeling so free and happy, pushed the fear away. "Yes," I said. "I'll come back." On my way home, my mind was buzzing. Mustafa. He was so kind, so easy to talk to. And he wanted to see me again. My logical brain told me it was impossible. Why would someone like him, someone who seemed so normal, be interested in me? He wasn't attracted to me, not really. It must be something else. But a tiny, hopeful voice in my heart whispered that maybe, just maybe, he saw something more. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying our conversation, the way he looked at me, the sound of his drumming. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, that he was just being friendly. But the hope, that tiny spark, was growing into a small flame. The next evening, I practically ran to our spot, my heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nerves. Mustafa was already there, sitting on a fallen log, his drum beside him. When he saw me, his face lit up with that same warm smile. He was genuinely happy to see me. And I was genuinely happy to see him too. We spent hours talking, learning more about each other and laughing. And of course, he drummed for me while I danced. Days turned into weeks, and our meetings became a regular part of my life. Our spot became our spot. We talked about everything, our dreams, our fears, our families. Mustafa never once mentioned my skeletal dysplasia, never acted like it was an issue. He just saw me, Damilola, the girl who loved to dance. And I saw him, Mustafa, the kind, talented drummer who made me feel seen and accepted. The connection between us grew stronger with each passing day. I found myself looking forward to our time together more than anything. It was a feeling I'd never experienced before, this sense of belonging, of being truly understood. It felt safe. Like I could finally just be myself, without any pretense or fear of judgment. One evening, as the sun was setting, Mustafa looked at me, his expression serious. My heart did a little flip. He told me how he felt about me. Even though I'd hoped, I hadn't dared to fully believe it. Hearing him say the words, it was overwhelming. Because I felt the same way. He wanted to come with his family to meet mine, to ask for my hand in marriage. My parents were ecstatic. They had given up hope of me ever finding a partner. It felt like a dream come true. We made plans for his family to visit on the next market day. Everything felt perfect, like my life was finally falling into place. I was going to marry Mustafa, the man who saw past my flaws and loved me. But life, as it often does, had other plans. A week before Mustafa was due to visit, but terrible illness, an airborne sickness, swept through our region. It was serious, and to stop it from spreading, all the villages closed their borders. We were told to stay indoors, to avoid contact with anyone. My heart sank. Not only would I not be able to see Mustafa, but the future we had planned was suddenly uncertain. To make things worse, a few days later, I started feeling sick. The airborne disease had found me. For over 3 months, I was incredibly ill. It was a struggle just to breathe, to stay alive. The sickness took away my appetite, I could barely finish a few bites of food a day. Months passed in a blur of fever and weakness. It was the hardest time of my life. But gradually, things started to change. A wise old herbalist discovered a cure, and people in the villages started to recover. As I slowly regained my strength, I noticed something incredible. The illness, in a strange and unexpected way, had changed my body. I wasn't skeletal anymore. I had gained weight, a healthy amount. I was almost normal. I couldn't believe it. It felt like a miracle. My face had filled out, and for the first time, I saw a reflection that wasn't just bones. My beauty, hidden for so long, was finally visible. Suddenly, the world treated me differently. Men who had never looked at me twice now stared with admiration. Wealthy, important men started approaching my parents, expressing interest in marriage. I was getting attention, validation, in a way I never had before. And honestly, it went to my head. I started to feel superior. Like I was too good for Mustafa, the simple drummer. When the borders finally reopened, I went to our spot, knowing he'd be there. And he was. His face lit up when he saw me, his smile as warm as ever. Damilola, he said, his voice full of emotion. You look amazing. I missed you so much. But I gave him the cold shoulder. I felt too elevated, too important for him now. He started to play his drum, expecting me to dance like we always did. Stop that noise. I snapped, my voice sharp. I'm not interested in your drumming anymore. I just came here to tell you I'm not marrying you. The hurt on his face was clear, but I didn't care. I know you've never been with someone like me before, I said, my voice dripping with arrogance. That's why you're always smiling like someone who just won a free meal. I turned and walked away, leaving him stunned and heartbroken. I want him never to contact me again. We were in different worlds now. Weeks turned into months. I was living in a whirlwind of attention. There was a constant stream of suitors at my door, wealthy merchants, landowners, even a minor nobleman from a nearby town. My parents were thrilled, busy arranging meetings and discussing dowries. I loved the attention, the feeling of being desired after so many years of feeling invisible. I entertained these men, listening to their elaborate proposals and enjoying the gifts they brought. I felt like a princess, finally getting the recognition and admiration I deserved. Mustafa's messages still arrived occasionally, delivered by his family or friends, simple notes asking me to reconsider, reminding me of what we had. But I just dismissed them, tossing them aside without a second thought. He was part of my past, a reminder of a time I wanted to forget. To choose my future husband from the many eligible bachelors, I came up with an idea. I decided to host a grand competition, a test of wit and talent, for all the men who wanted to marry me. It would be a series of challenges held over 3 days in the village square. The first day would test their knowledge of history and poetry, the second, their skill in crafting or art, and the third, their ability to solve complex riddles. The man who excelled in all 3 areas would be crowned my suitor, the one I would marry. The news spread like wildfire, reaching far beyond our village borders. Men from all over, eager to win the hand of the king's daughter. My father held a respected position in our community, though not a formal king, signed up to compete. My father was proud, inviting important people, even some minor royalty from neighboring areas, to witness the event. To ensure I looked my absolute best for the competition, I decided to spend the next 4 months indoors, receiving the most luxurious beauty treatments. I wanted to be radiant, stunning, the perfect prize for the winner. I had massages, special baths, and used expensive creams and oils. I was convinced that my transformation was permanent, that I was finally free from the limitations of my skeletal dysplasia. But I made a critical mistake. While I was focused on external beauty, I completely ignored the underlying cause of my previous thinness and my recent weight gain. I went back to my old eating habits, indulging in large portions of rich food, just like I had before the illness. As the 4 months passed, a subtle, unsettling change began to occur. I tried to ignore it at first, dismissing it as just a temporary fluctuation. But the truth was undeniable. My clothes were starting to feel tighter. My reflection in the mirror wasn't quite as filled out as it had been. The weight I had gained, the healthy weight that had made me feel beautiful and desirable, was slowly, steadily disappearing. My old skeletal frame was starting to reemerge. The illness had been a temporary fix, not a permanent cure. My skeletal dysplasia was still a part of me, affecting my body's ability to maintain weight without careful management. By the time the 4 months were over, the devastating truth was undeniable. I had returned to my previous skeletal state. Looking in the mirror was a shock. The radiant beauty I had envisioned was gone, replaced by the familiar sight of protruding bones. I was heartbroken, terrified, and utterly humiliated. I immediately went to my father, begging him to cancel the competition. I couldn't face the crowd, the suitors, looking like this. But my father, who had already made all the arrangements and invited so many important guests, refused. "Don't worry, my dear," he said, trying to sound reassuring. "I'm sure you will find a suitor regardless of your present situation." His words offered little comfort. The day of the competition arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves and dread. Warriors, farmers, traders, and many other eligible men gathered in the village square, buzzing with anticipation. They had come to compete for the hand of the king's daughter, the beautiful princess they had heard so much about. When it was time for me to be presented to the crowd, my father called my name. I walked out, my head held high, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. The moment I stepped into the square, a hush fell over the crowd. The men stared, their faces a mixture of shock, disappointment, and even pity. Their expressions were like a punch to the gut. They hadn't bargained for this. They had come for the beautiful, healthy woman they had heard about, not the skeletal figure standing before them. The whispers started, louder this time, less discreet than before. I heard fragments of conversations, men expressing their disappointment, their frustration. "Is that her? She looks nothing like," they said. And then, one by one, they started to leave. The crowd thinned out, men turning their backs and walking away, their dreams of marrying the king's daughter dissolving before my eyes. The humiliation was unbearable. I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. Just as I was about to turn and flee, to escape the shame and the stares, my eyes landed on a familiar figure at the edge of the square. My heart stopped. It was Mustafa. But he wasn't wearing the simple clothes I was used to seeing him in. He was dressed in fine fabrics, embroidered with symbols of royalty. He looked regal, powerful, so different from the humble drama I had known. Our eyes met across the distance, and for a long moment the world seemed to fade away. It was just us, looking at each other, a silent conversation passing between our eyes. Before either of us could move or speak, a voice interrupted the moment. A man, also dressed in fine clothes, approached Mustafa. "My prince," he said, bowing respectfully. "Your father is ready to leave now." My breath hitched. Prince Mustafa was a prince. The kind, gentle drummer who had seen me, truly seen me, when no one else did, was royalty. The son of the king of one of the neighboring villages. It all made sense now, his ease, his confidence, the way he carried himself. He had disguised himself during the festivals because he loved music and wanted to experience it without the fanfare and special treatment that came with his title. As I watched Mustafa turn and walk away with his attendant, a wave of realization crashed over me. I had been so blinded by my own insecurities, then by my fleeting physical transformation and the attention it brought, that I had completely missed the most important thing. Mustafa hadn't loved me because I was suddenly normal or beautiful in the conventional sense. He had loved me when I was at my most vulnerable, when my skeletal dysplasia defined how the world saw me. He had loved me, the girl who loved to dance, the girl he connected with on a deeper level. He had seen past the bones, past the condition, and loved the person inside. And I, in my foolish pride and newfound arrogance, had thrown that love away. I had chased superficial validation, the approval of a world that only valued outward appearances. I had believed that being normal and desired by many was more important than being truly loved by one. Watching Mustafa walk away, knowing who he really was and what I had lost, was a pain unlike anything I had ever felt. It was a deep, aching regret that settled in my chest and wouldn't leave. I had traded genuine connection and unconditional love for fleeting attention and the empty promise of status. The competition was, of course, cancelled. The suitors who had remained left, their disappointment palpable. I was left standing in the empty square, the silence amplifying the sound of my own regret. My father was disappointed, but he couldn't force anyone to marry me. The truth was, my skeletal dysplasia was a part of me, and while it didn't define my worth, it did affect how many people saw me in that society. And after my brief period of normalcy, it seemed even harder for people to look past it. The offers of marriage stopped coming. The attention faded away. I tried, for a while, to reach out to Mustafa. I sent messages, apologies, explanations. But they were all returned, unopened or with a polite refusal. I had hurt him deeply, not just by rejecting him, but by doing it in such a cruel and arrogant way. I had shown him that I valued superficial things over his genuine love. And some wounds, once inflicted, are too deep to heal easily. He had moved on with his life, as he had every right to do. He likely found someone who appreciated him, someone who saw his true worth, both as a person and as a prince. My story doesn't have a fairy tale ending. I never found that kind of love again, the kind that sees past the surface and loves unconditionally. In the end, as the years passed and my options dwindled, I settled. I became the 10th wife of an old chief in a distant village. It wasn't a marriage of love, but of necessity and arrangement. I had a roof over my head and a place in society, but my heart remained empty, haunted by the memory of the kind drama who had loved me for who I was, skeletal and all. The most important lesson I learned, the one that cost me so much, is this: never, ever take for granted the people who are there for you when you are at your lowest. The ones who see your struggles, your imperfections, and still choose to love and support you. These people are incredibly rare and precious. They are the ones who see your true worth, not just your outward appearance or your temporary circumstances. When life throws you a bone, when things finally seem to get better, it's easy to forget those who stood by you in the darkness. But those are the people who truly matter. They are the foundation of genuine connection and lasting happiness. If you treat them unfairly, if you push them away when you think you've outgrown them, you might just lose the most valuable thing you had. You might never get the opportunity to have them in your life again. My skeletal dysplasia was a challenge, yes, but the biggest obstacle to my happiness wasn't my body, it was my own insecurity and my inability to appreciate the love that was freely given to me. So, if there's one thing I want you to take away from my story, especially if you're dealing with your own struggles, your own insecurities, it's this: look around you. Who are the people who see you, really see you, and love you anyway? Cherish them. Hold on to them. Don't let the world's shallow definitions of beauty or success blind you to the true treasures in your life. Because those who love you when you're at your worst are the ones who deserve to be with you when you're at your best. And sometimes, the best isn't about changing who you are, but about finding someone who loves you exactly as you are. My story is a cautionary tale, a reminder that external changes, even miraculous ones, don't fix internal flaws. My skeletal dysplasia will always be a part of my history, but the real scar I carry is the regret of losing Mustafa. The memory of his kind smile and the sound of his drumming still echo in my mind, the bittersweet reminder of the love I had and foolishly discarded. I hope my experience can help someone else avoid making the same mistake. Value the people who value you, especially when you feel like you have nothing to offer. They are the ones who will lift you up and show you your own worth. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but if it helps even one person appreciate the love they have, then it was worth it. Please think about what I've said. Who are the Mustafas in your life? Don't let them get away. Comment below and let me know what you learned from my experience. And if this story resonated with you, please like and share it with your loved ones. Sometimes, hearing someone else's struggles can help us see our own lives a little more clearly. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and take care of the people who love you. The end.